Now join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Keep the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. Glad you're here. Nothing better to do on a Saturday morning, so you show up. I appreciate it. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here?
I wanted to come here for a long time.
Long time. How long?
Years.
Years. I'm pondering if I ask any more or not, but I'll leave it at that. Well, I'm glad you finally made it. Welcome. What else? First time?
A friend of mine told me about it.
Is your friend here, or did they just ship you off? Right on. Well, welcome. It's a good friend. Well, I guess we'll let you decide that after. Glad you're here.
I really enjoy the philosophy
Nice. Philosophy of?
of Buddhism.
Right on. How much do you enjoy yourself?
Quite a bit.
Oh, there you go. Well, good. So if you enjoy Buddhism and you enjoy yourself, then it should be okay. A lot of people don't enjoy themselves. Right? Anyone want to openly, honestly just admit they don't really enjoy themselves all the time? That's actually more hands than I expected to see. And then there's always the handful or so that didn't want to put their hands up, and then there's the others who are just not sure and ponder it. Maybe midway through meditation, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, me," as your head is driving you insane. So, yeah, it's really it's a big part of this practice is learning to enjoy, be okay with, accept, embrace, and just be with yourself. Because who are you with all the time, like it or not? Yourself. And no matter how many places or things we go do or run off to, or who we're with, or who we're around, or where we're at, there's that expression, wherever you go, there you are. And so the sooner you get to, and enjoy, for a lot of people, is even like a reach, Some people just want to embrace or accept or be okay with themselves. Like, to enjoy yourself, that's a whole nother level of wisdom right there. So we don't want to aim too high yet. Let's aim for just learning to be okay with yourself. How many have a difficult time being proud of themselves for the journey they've been on? Right? It's tough sometimes to stop and recognize, wow, this has been a rough road, For me, that was the first thing that sold me on the Buddhist teachings, was when I learned that the first thing he said was life is filled with suffering. I was like, oh yeah, that guy's pretty smart. He's got it figured out. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of page one. And if you can start there and recognize that that's a big part of your life, then you get to work on the rest, which is finding a sense of peace and happiness in your life. Learning to embrace and be okay with yourself, and then eventually enjoying yourself. So With that, and good morning to our millions of YouTube fans out there. Glad you could make it today. Michelle and Amy, good to see you. Feel free to chime in, say hello, chat with each other. When we get to questions, I'll be happy to respond to you as well, assuming I can still see it. So we'll start with the meditation practice. There's a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Okay, you're not going to float away. Don't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or doing it wrong? We're just going to sit and we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Same thing if you're on a chair or a bench. Stomach is forward, shoulders are relaxed, hands are on the knees or on the lap, whatever's comfortable. Feet are flat on the floor if they reach. If not, you can always slide forward. I'll do my best to keep you awake. I will say things periodically to wake you up or remind you that you're lost in thought. Most important, we're just going to sit and breathe. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Bless you. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments of the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation won't fix that. We don't want meditation or Buddhist practice to be the thing you're running to. Because what that means is you're running away from your life. This practice is about having direct perception into the present moment. And if your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, becoming aware of that and understanding why, and then making changes within your life. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate so many things and people and places around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it is a practice. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. So ultimately, it's like sitting in front of a mirror and reflecting back on yourself, your thoughts, your words, your actions. That's it. And very often that's difficult for a lot of people to do Because it's a lot easier to just point fingers and blame everything else and everyone else for all the problems in our life and in our world. And this practice is waking up to ourselves. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we use the rest of our time this morning, and I'll respond to your thoughts or questions.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I had a baby 5 weeks ago.
I know. I wasn't going to call you out, but since you did,
Thank
congratulations.
you.
So you've been busy a little bit, huh?
Yes, I'm so glad to be here.
I was going to question why you hadn't been here in so long, but I knew why. All right, sorry, go ahead.
I'm wondering, I know Shifeng Temple has like a baby blessing
Yes.
thing. Do Buddhists do some sort of ceremony for new babies where like family and friends come?
Yeah. So Buddhism, like all religions, has all of that stuff. All the bells and whistles. All of these things, and you've been around me years, I'm going to give a little bit of a larger story to it other than just a simple yes, because that would be too easy, But just like all religions, Buddhism has that stuff. And, it's not like the Buddha was teaching one day and gave like the baby naming discourse. These aren't things that specifically come from teachings of Buddhism. But they're all there. And there are, within each culture of Buddhism, different ways that they do it. So there are precept ceremonies where you take the 5 precepts. There are refuge ceremonies where you take refuge in the triple gem and you get a cool Dharma name, in some other language usually. There are baby naming ceremonies that they can do, beautiful blessing and, stuff like that. So all of that does exist. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think with all of that, not just for you, but for everybody, often people ask questions like, well, and it's not always with younger people, but it's often with younger people where, you get like a 20-year-old that'll show up here and they're like, I want to be Buddhist. What do I need to do? And it's not like something necessarily that you sign up for. And my master used to say that, you can shave your head and put on a robe, but that doesn't make you Buddhist. That being Buddhist is really about your heart, your mind, your intention, your actions. And so with that regard, again, for those who might be brand new or newer to this, it's not about like leaving one religion and converting to Buddhism. It doesn't really work that way with Buddhist practice. Buddhism is a practice. It's a way of life. It is a religion. It is a philosophy. It's both of those things. Even though I know many people turn to Buddhism because they're like, oh, I hate religion. I'm going to do that Buddhist thing. So I don't want to ruin it for you and tell you it is actually a religion. You keep believing what you want. That's all that really matters, right? But it definitely has a strong faith-based devout practice that comes from 2,500 years of different cultures and rituals and things like that. But for the average Western person who shows up to Buddhism later on in life, it's a philosophy and a way of life. And it is beautiful. So being Buddhist is not as important as being kind, being compassionate, being wise. That's really, years ago, someone asked the Dalai Lama if this country needed more Buddhists. And his answer was, the world has enough Buddhists. This country just needs more people that are, peaceful and happy. That was his response. And I think that's really the beautiful wisdom behind the Buddhist teachings. Is the Buddha himself wasn't Buddhist. He was Hindu. So, yeah. And I'll send you the the top 5 Yelp reviews for Buddhist temples with the best baby naming ceremonies. I would stay to 4 stars and above.
Of course.
Other questions? Yeah.
I've been reading about, I believe, sunyata and like the concept of emptiness, and I've seen it both variously defined within Mahayana Buddhism as emptiness as in there being nothing there, and then emptiness the same way like a bowl is empty and that it is expected to contain something. Is one definition like more correct or make more sense than the other? Or I guess can you like explain sunyata to me?
Yes and no. Ironically, where you're sitting, look up to your right. Do you see that calligraphy script? It's from the Heart Sutra. And that piece right there says, form is precisely emptiness. Emptiness is precisely form. So I'm glad I clarified that for you. So shunyata, for those who don't know, translates to the word emptiness. And it is the heart of the what's called the prajna paramita. Prajna being wisdom, paramita being perfections. Shunyata or emptiness is the heart of the prajna paramita teachings, perfection of wisdom teachings within the Mahayana school of Buddhism, which developed around the turn of the century, about 500-600 years after the Buddha died. So he lived 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ. He was 80 when he died. And around, like I said, turn of the century, Buddhism goes north into China, Japan, Korea, and you have the development of Mahayana Buddhism. And that's where the emptiness teachings and the Prajnaparamita Sutras really developed. Now, some history behind it, and I'm not a scholar historian, but just basic knowledge. It really goes back to when the Buddha was teaching, and this is where what we refer to as Zen. Zen is a Japanese word. In Chinese, it's Chan. And it comes from the word jhana, which is knowledge or gnosis. And it really begins that whole lineage of what we call Zen, where it became really popular, and especially popular in the US in kind of the 60s, 70s with Japanese Buddhism and teachings from D.T. Suzuki and Shunryu Suzuki that really popularized Buddhism in America, especially in San Francisco in the 60s. You get, well, without going into all that. And the Buddha held up a flower. And it said at that moment, Mahakeshyapa, one of his disciples, understood the meaning of this teaching. No words were exchanged, just the flower. And it said that at that moment, there was a mind-to-mind transmission of the Dharma, of the Buddhist teachings. That became the beginning of what we call, most often referred to as Zen Buddhism. The 6th patriarch, Hui Neng, is very famous, couldn't read or write, but he became the 6th patriarch of Zen Buddhism. Then the 28th patriarch, which is very famous, Bodhidharma, is the one who left India and brought Buddhism into China. If you're downstairs headed into, Buddha for you area, the dining area there, oh no, we moved it. I think it's in the meditation hall now, but there's an image of Bodhidharma. And if you've ever seen it, he's got like these really big bug eyes. It's because they say that he was so intent on awakening that he cut his eyelids off and he stared at a wall for like 8 years. Okay. I don't suggest you try that at home. It's a story from a long time ago and that doesn't work anymore. So don't try that, but that's the story. And it's to me a metaphor of how diligent he was with his meditation practice. All of these kind of stories and teachings and things, coming back to your question about emptiness, the Buddha praised another of his disciples, Subhuti, for his discourse on emptiness. You know what Subhuti said about it? Nothing. Know what I've said to you for the last 5 minutes? Not much. What I will suggest is two things. One, read less, practice more. I'm not suggesting that you not. I don't even really know you, so it's just it's not an attack on what you're doing. But when somebody asks a question about shunyata, the way you asked it, it says to me that you're really trying to study this stuff. And emptiness is an experience, not a text. The second thing is to completely contradict what I just said, since you quite possibly will ignore what I just said. If you are going to read something on emptiness, read the Heart Sutra. That's where that comes from. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is precisely emptiness, emptiness is precisely form. And I suggest a translation of Thich Nhat Hanh. Is a really beautiful, as the Dalai Lama as well, but I like Thich Nhat Hanh's better. Translation of the Dharma Sutra, or of the Heart Sutra. The last thing I'll say on emptiness is that from I can tell you what emptiness is not, and even that's not correct to say. But it's not the confusion that people often have around emptiness is when they hear emptiness, they think of nothingness. Emptiness is not nothing. Emptiness allows everything to exist and be possible. It is only from the conditions of emptiness that the entire world and everything in it can exist. So, hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
Just thinking about Dalai Lama since he's been mentioned a few times already.
All right. I didn't hear a word you said. That's why.
I was just thinking about the Dalai Lama since he's been mentioned a few times, and he seems to me like one of the most joyful people
Right?
I've ever seen. Like he just emanates this incredible joy and happiness and like love for everyone. And like thinking about also what you said at the beginning, like life is suffering. I mean, he seems like the absolute antithesis of that. And I'm just curious, like, where does that joy come from? Like, is that specifically cultivated in his practice? Is it like where does that come
Right. Like, how can we all be as happy as the Dalai Lama is what you really want to know. You ever seen him in hats? No? Oh my God. If you love him already, just Google like Dalai Lama in a hat. So when he goes, he's, and I mean that with all no disrespect. Like when he speaks at colleges a lot, it's always been a big thing. He's traveling and touring less for lots of reasons. But in the U.S., he would always go around to different colleges for years and speak. And when he would go there, he would often take a hat from the college he was at, and he would wear them. And it's like he's already the happiest guy in the world, and then here's like this, 70-year-old Tibetan Lama with like a college hat on. It's so great. Where does that happiness come from? Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Dalai Lama experiences pain? Right? Do you think he experiences suffering, loss, sadness, heartbreak? Right? I mean, he's been living in exile from his, he can't even go home. Right? That guy has experienced, like, you can leave here and go home. Where were you born?
San Diego.
Oh, well, that'll be an easy trip for you, right? But you have a place you live? You can go home. Imagine somebody showed up one day and says, you can't go home. He has experienced and seen as a spiritual, religious leader so much suffering and pain. And I just pointed this out for anyone who might not be familiar with him, because it's very often again, this isn't your question specifically, but we can see like monks like that, lamas, and they're always laughing and they're always joyful. Especially Tibetan lamas are the best. I mean, they're like just so joyful. And I want to point out for everybody to understand that that doesn't mean that they haven't experienced and gone through tremendous pain, suffering, and loss in their life. They have, absolutely. Many of them potentially even more so. This is a very broad generalization, but from living with monks and nuns for a year, many of them have gone through even more pain than we can imagine, and that's actually what led them to renounce and become monks or nuns. Because they wanted to, and you said the word cultivate, they wanted to cultivate this spiritual practice on such a deeper level than we do. You know, I mean, the average person, we're lucky if we go to a Dharma talk once a week and do a meditation a couple times a week, right? And often we think like, yeah, that's my Buddhist thing. But the monastic path, that's their entire life is that. They have left all of the nonsense that we get ourselves wrapped up in, you know? One of the simplest things that I saw and enjoyed in that life for just 11 months was like, how many of you woke up and you're like, what am I going to wear today? Right? How much time did you spend pondering that?
Too long.
Too long, right? You know what monks and nuns wear? The same thing every single day. One less thing to worry about. How much time do you spend preparing your hair? Me, none, but you know. The clothes we wear, the shoes we put on, the hair, the makeup, the cars we drive, all these like layperson householder things that we get wrapped up in. They've left all of that. What that means is their life is devoted 100% of the time to cultivating their spiritual practice. How much of our lives are spent cultivating spiritual practice? Just throw out some guesses or some numbers that relate to you. How much of your time is spent cultivating the spiritual practice?
Not enough.
Not enough? What else? Couple hours a week. And these aren't attacks. These are like awarenesses. Not enough. Couple hours a week. What else? Sporadically, right? So sporadically, a couple times a week, not enough, right? Back to your question, how did the Dalai Lama get so happy? His primary focus of his entire life is spiritual practice. And from that, he engages in the world. You know, I tend to think my life is incredibly hectic and busy with all the things I do. I can't even imagine what it would be like to have a Dalai Lama schedule. Right? So it's important to understand that just because people renounce the householder life and live kind of that lifestyle doesn't mean they don't have a billion things to do. But it all starts with the cultivating the spiritual path and practice. So when they engage and embrace and experience pain, suffering, loss, trauma, they come at it from a place of just deep, deep compassion and deep wisdom. Complete selflessness, right? That's, I mean, the Dalai Lama, his name means ocean of wisdom. I don't know if you knew that, but that's the literal translation of his name. That's a lot of wisdom, right? And he is just the most compassionate human I've ever seen in my entire life. So everything in his life is filled with compassion and wisdom. That's why he's so joyful. But again, I want to emphasize that doesn't mean that he doesn't experience pain or suffering or loss or sadness or tears or things like that. He's human. Monks, nuns, lamas, all those Zen priests, they're human. They have mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and brothers and sisters and all of those things. You brush your teeth every day? comb your hair every day? Not every day, but you get my point, right? We spend a lot of time invested on the physical nature of our presence. Brushing our teeth, combing our hair, and the clothes we wear. We put way more emphasis on that than we do on cultivating spiritual practice. That's why we're not the Dalai Lama. So, but as the great Zen master Shundra Suzuki says, you're all perfect exactly how you are, and you all could use a little improvement. Meaning, be patient with yourself. The fact that you're sitting here, that you're all sitting here, that we're all sitting here, exploring this path and this practice and asking these questions, you know what that says? That you're on the right track. Because how long has meditation or Buddhism been a part of your life? A year, right? So that means all the other years that you were alive, it was not a part of your life. Big difference in viewing the world, right? In the person you were all those years and in the person you are just in a year of looking at this stuff. So if you got all these years over here of not this path and a year over here of this path, stay on the path. Yeah. Hope that helps. Other thoughts, questions? He also has a great book, The Art of Happiness. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a wonderful book that was, a bestseller. And any other questions before I say what I was going to say? I think it's important to understand, and anytime I bring up that book, it's what makes me think of it, is that in the Buddhist teachings, like specifically, yes, he talks about experiencing empathetic joy, but I've always approached the Buddhist teachings not as like this searching or quest for happiness, but seen it as happiness, joy, right? Like true spiritual joy and happiness actually is not something that you gain from anything that you do, but it arises from the removal of things that we do. Meaning, if we remove so much of our pride and so much of our ego and so much of this attachment to self, all the things the Buddha was teaching, and if our actions are not driven by greed and anger and ignorance, which the Buddha called the three poisons, but our actions are driven by generosity, compassion, and wisdom, which is how we overcome the three poisons. If we do these things and we remove self, pride, ego, to me, empathetic joy, happiness, these are side effects. But if we stay greedy, angry people, filled with pride and me, and then we seek happiness, it doesn't work. We have to remove the pride and ego. And that, my friends, is a lifelong practice. It's not a quick fix. It's not an overnight, it's not a 6-week course. It's not something you pay $4.99 for and all of a sudden you're good and get a certificate, right? It's a lifelong practice. So we keep practicing. Anything else before we close on that or anything at all? Yeah.
This is kind of related. It's about meditation. like you said, I find meditation can be very, very difficult at times. But I was thinking the other day about past masters or even current masters who have spent, let's say, some of them years in caves somewhere. And I can't imagine how they focused on that type of I guess the question is where. I know meditation isn't like going through a school, but thinking about how it must evolve, I find very curious. I'm wondering what your thoughts on that.
The last sentence you said, did you say thinking about how it must evolve or how I must evolve? I wasn't sure. And I'm not like joking. I was curious
I
to know what you said. The last part.
Right. How you would evolve, how
Yeah.
I have evolved.
How you would evolve. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So,
To that point.
have you ever lived in a cave?
Some places.
Sorry. I'm not talking about your level of unhealthy places. I'm talking about a cave, right? Like the masters you're talking about.
Right.
Have you ever just left your life and moved to a cave? No. Have you ever just left your life and said, I'm going to do nothing but focus on spiritual practice for the next year?
You always think about it, but
No, we think about a lot of things, right?
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that you do this. I just want to point out a few things. You're asking about how does one cultivate? It's a very similar question in a different way to how do we become as happy as the Dalai Lama?
Exactly.
Well, how do we learn to do what those people who did living in caves? If we only do this once a week for an hour, and we pick up a book here or there, and we read some, Pema Chodron thing, and then we spend 8 hours on Netflix and 5 hours a day doing stupid stuff and eating a bunch of crap and going to a bunch of places that are miserable and gossiping all day long and slandering. And I'm not talking about you. I'm just this for everybody, right? If that's our life, and then we read a book about the master in the cave, we want to be the master in the cave, but we don't want to do anything else that the master did. You don't have to go to a cave to cultivate that. What will happen, and I'll kind of sum this up briefly and then we'll close on this thought, is that most people are not just going to be in the life they're in right now and be able to, even in a healthy manner, unplug and just go live in a cave. And that's a metaphor for any type of deep spiritual living, right?
And in California.
Or in California, anywhere, right? We're not going to go from where we are now to that. When I say that, I mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We're nowhere near ready for something like that. You'd be in a cave for 2 days, you'd go stir crazy, and you'd go running back to where you were. But in time, with practice, doing all the other things you've been listening to me talk about for years, we may find ourselves getting closer to that type of practice, to where it wouldn't be, even just conceptually, intellectually, philosophically, as difficult to imagine. These are creating and cultivating the conditions in our lives that bring us closer to doing something like that. Again, the goal is not to do something like that. The goal is to be less greedy, less angry, less miserable with what you do all day long. Most people do not spend their days on a spiritual journey. We spend our days wrapped up in a bunch of madness, surrounded by easy, quick fixes and, fast food, fast movies, fast people, just instant gratification, Netflix, Coca-Cola, and burgers. That's where we spend so much of our time. And then we dream and read about Dalai Lama and caves and beautiful spiritual practice. Do the simple things to help close that distance. You know? And I bet, Chuck, by your next life, you'll be ready. All right?
That's true.
So I'm going to close on that. I wanted to leave you on a positive note. I didn't want you to think it wasn't attainable. You know? You're like one life away. I can feel it. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the nearly 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic and their family and friends who continue to suffer at this time, and to all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas that suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers. We don't live in caves. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So just about every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. We shut down for 16 months. We opened for 6. We closed for another 2. And hopefully we're just going to continue to stay open. So most of our schedule is back up and running. Our family Sangha, you can join the family Sangha. Yes, that'll start on the 14th of May. Announcement will be coming out soon, but that'll start once a month. Usually it's the second and fourth Saturday. We're going to start with the second Saturday of the month right now. That'll be up on the website or newsletter in the next couple days. And the Day of Silence retreat will return in June. It'll be the first Saturday, and that will also have an RSVP. So we're slowly just bringing everything back. The temple's still closed during the week, during the day. We open 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. for morning meditation, and then close during the day, and then open up nighttime for classes. So Saturday and Sunday, temple's open 12 to 3. If you want to, sit, hang out. We do, Karen, where you? I just saw you. Karen, you sticking around? We do have outside temples like this. We see a ton of people. It's a huge space, and we have no cleaning crew and no grounds crew. So anytime you want to help, it's here for you. So Karen will guide you outside if you want to sweep or, pick up leaves or whatever it might be, help water. We always need people doing that. Buddha for You, same thing. We're shut down all that time. It's open. Maggie's down there right now. If you need books or anything, that's downstairs. Other than that, thanks for being here. Please continue to be safe. We appreciate you all still wearing masks. It keeps everybody here comfortable and safe as much as possible. So be well. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.